And sometimes you'll hear this guy, Shannon Griffith, on there. But you can also always catch him at Hoosier Tailgate, his podcast regarding Indiana football. And there's starting to be more and more news to talk about football-wise, Shannon, for Indiana.
Yeah, when you have a change in staff, I think it's a little bit more focused in the efforts of what's occurring. Of course, recruiting kind of dominates the airways at this time of year with the transfer portal and all the things that have encompassed college football now that things have changed.
Yeah, and good news we've seen for Indiana as a lot of names went into the portal, and I knew that a lot of those guys weren't coming back. You already had guys like Brendan Sorsby commit to Cincinnati. We just saw that daggone it. Who was it that went to, I just said his name a minute ago, is going to Tulsa to play for Kevin Wilson.
Miles
Jackson, which he must be a grad student, because that would be his third school.
Yeah.
And so he probably has graduated, but regardless of that, there's been some good names coming back already. Carter
Smith.
Carter Smith is the biggest of those we talked about earlier. That's huge for Indiana. I mean, because they lost so much of or potentially losing so much of their offensive line, which they had already had some problems with. But that's your anchor, man. I mean, I know it's on the other side of the line as well, but to me, in football, baby, you've got to be good on the line, especially to me, number one is the offensive line. If you don't have a good offensive line, I don't care how good your quarterback is. I don't care how good your running back is. They're not going to get much of an opportunity to operate. And so job number one has to be sustaining this offensive line for Indiana.
Yeah. And, Bobstead had, finally, got comfortable as the year went along with the guys that he was playing. And you could see that progress up front, but you lose Bedford and Benson now. I think they're both going to Colorado, if I'm not mistaken. And so those are two key components that you lose. Smith, by all means, was probably the necessary one that you needed to keep, because one, he's a young kid, and number two, he is only going to get better. Being that he was only a redshirt freshman last year. So, I don't know what they got in the pipeline as it pertains to their depth. I know that's always been probably the Achilles heel with Indiana, is their first five are pretty decent. Once they got into the depth issues, that's when they started running into a lot of problems. So the more they can solidify that, the better they'll be. And like I said, Coach Bobstead, he's a really good coach. But it all goes by what you have in the hopper there that's going to make you a good coach or a bad coach. It's that's the difference,
And what makes that even more difficult, as you just pointed out, having that your solid line to begin with, but having the guys behind that. So it's a double duty for Coach Cignetti, and coming on the heels of his contract being announced, which nothing that jumps off the page for you to go, oh wow, hey, he's probably one of the, I know he's one of the lowest paid coaches in the Big Ten, but it's a substantial raise for what he has done,
right?
For what he has been getting. But success will alter that. We've seen that before. Once you have, if Indiana football is succeeding, they will give him an extension and do what they need to do. But it's looking good right now. For one thing, there's excitement amongst Indiana fans,
right?
And it seems genuine. And there has not been much outside of 19 and 20 that I've seen this kind of excitement with Indiana football.
Yeah, and I think the big reason too with that is his track record. I think people can see a history of success. Kevin Wilson came, he was an assistant coach, and Tom was an assistant coach, so they really didn't have a track record that they brought to the table. Where Coach Cignetti now, he's got a track record of success at many different places, and he's worked more with less, I guess you could say, in some of those places that it's produced where he's had winning records. The big thing about his contract that I thought was interesting is if they get to the bowl games, the one big thing is it triggers like a $500,000 potential budget increase for his staff, personnel, and assistants.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. Now, of course, that's all got to be signed off on by the, Scott Dolson there. But that's one big thing that automatically raises that pool to keep assistants potentially from going other places if they have a, big success. So I thought that was an interesting component in the contract, as you would expect. I mean, Indiana's contracts are more reward for success than they are upfront rewarded in terms of dollars and cents of it. But, he's making a good chunk of change, and he's good and covered. And the assistant pool, I think, was even better for that. And, they're hitting the ground running. I mean, they're scrambling right now because of the not the deadlines, but the first signing date, and doing the double duty of trying to keep kids from going elsewhere, especially those ones that could have a potential impact like they did last year. Haven't heard much on Macaulay of late. I know Lucas has gotten some feelers and offers out there, but, I would hope that they could keep one of those two guys, but I don't think it's, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Did you go to Fort Wayne Northrop? I did. I'm a Bruin.
So, Jamie says hello. One of our listeners said, ask Mr. Griffith if he went to Fort Wayne Northrop. If so, tell him he says hello. There you go, Jamie. And you can tell him hello back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jamie. Appreciate that. Yeah. I was a 1986 grad of Fort Wayne Northrop up here in the great city of Fort Wayne, Indiana. But, and I think they got some key commitments that he was able to flip, from some of the kids that he was recruiting down there at James Madison, the one kid being the quarterback out of Miami, and his name is escaping me right now.
Alberto Mendoza.
Yeah. I've had a chance
two-time state champion, just won another state title.
Yeah. Had a chance to watch some film on him. Good, solid kid, throws it well, and also has escapability. So he brings a dynamic, where, he's a mobile quarterback. And I think in today's game, you've got to have quarterbacks that can also be a threat to run the football, that will keep defenses honest. And that's one thing that I think Indiana, from an offensive philosophy, the run game has to have some quarterbacks mixed to it. And that just helps keep defenses from, packing the box and, daring you to throw it all the time and, going to shut your run game down. So I know that Coach Cignetti and what they did at James Madison, they've always had that type of kid that can be a threat on the perimeter as well, and running the ball and throwing it. So that was a big cog that they got. I'd like to see him get the Cherry kid out of Indy, but we'll see on that one. He's got a lot of offers. I know he had Duke as a commit, but with the upheaval of Elko going to Texas A&M, that kind of brought him back into the mix potentially for Indiana. And, he has his staff in place. I mean, he's got everything rolling, and he's not bogged down by trying to who he's going to hire next or in that regard. So they've got an identity that kids can see who they're going to be coached by. And it's a good young staff. I think that's another thing that I've noticed is the young guys that are not too long, too far along in their profession, but the relatability factor in recruiting and establishing those relationships, not only with high school coaches throughout the Midwest and some of the South is important. And then, of course, the relationships those guys can connect with kids, I think, is huge as well.
Absolutely. And I want to go back. That takes me back to you talking about the assistants and how important it is. And his name's escaping me, the quarterback's coach.
Tino
Yeah.
Sunseri, I think is how you pronounce it. Yeah, Tino.
He seems to be really an attractive coach to these kids. He's young and dynamic. Mm-hmm. I saw them put out a social media piece on the quarterbacks that they have developed. Yeah. That they take great pride in that.
Oh, and absolutely.
But that is also something Indiana has not been able to say. They have not developed players. Mm-hmm. You've got to put players into the NFL. And I'm not saying you've got to have 10 guys going like Ohio State, but you have to consistently put somebody in the NFL. If you're not, then you're not developing talent, and you're not giving kids a reason to go to that school.
Yeah, and I think for places like Indiana, especially now, too many of their kids, when they come here, and this happens to the mid-majors as well, they have a fantastic year. They jump in the portal to see their value, but they also are looking at who can help me get to that next level. So if I go to USC or Auburn or Alabama, I'm going to have a great chance, but you lose as a kid like that. So now it is imperative when they've got those kids that they've developed and they're getting production out of them, is trying to keep them at Indiana and not getting into this, free agency period, as I like to call it, where they lose a guy that ends up going somewhere else because of what you just explained there. They see their advantages not only monetarily go up, but the opportunity to be on a bigger stage, perhaps, and get a better look in the NFL. But sometimes I think it gets overblown. I think NFL will find you no matter where you're at if you're a good player. They don't really care other than, how good a player you really are and how can you fit into their system and things of that magnitude. But you're right. NFL availability for a kid is important. And I think Indiana can do that. That piece that you're talking about, I think it was labeled the arms that Coach Cignetti has been involved with throughout his coaching career, because he had Phillip Rivers in there as well. And if I remember correctly, Coach Cignetti was at North Carolina State when Phillip Rivers was there, if I'm not mistaken. And that's how that piece came together with all those individuals. And then you talked about the success, I think, last time, is the number of quarterbacks that have become not only first team all conference, but conference players of the year at James Madison. So Coach Cignetti and Tino, that's a good combination that they've proven here over the last few years.
Yeah. And there's pressure on him to get, you've got to be able to field a competitive team next year. I don't think anyone expects him to go 8-4 and do this, that, or the other thing. But I think 6-6 is still going to be a mark that is looked at for a couple of reasons. Number one, because Indiana has 8 home games next year.
I know.
That is huge.
Unheard of.
I mean, well, not only that, you could not ask for a better situation for a new coach. Purdue, you saw what happened at Purdue with Ryan Walters coming in. He's a good coach. Of course, I think that him leaving Illinois is why Illinois took a drop, is they took away their defensive coach. Purdue went through their first year troubles. You will expect that from Indiana, but you're going to want more. And especially with 8 home games, 3 of those games being those non-conference 3 wins, it's not. It will not be out of the question to ask for 3 wins out of those 9 Big Ten games.
Yeah, and like I said, having 8 home games is kind of unheard of. And, sometimes the schedule works against you. Sometimes it works in your favor. Him having 8 home games as a first-year head coach in the Big Ten will be a very, very big topic of conversation as terms of motivation with players and coaches and such, that they can make a huge splash if they can protect their home field. And having those games at home, the 6-6 mark, like you talked about, that's kind of the bowl eligibility target. But as well as I do, Cignetti's thinking we're going to win all 8 at home right now. He's not going to look at the thing and say, well, we should beat them. So if we can be, 5-3 at home, we're good. His mindset's winning those 8.
And that's of uber importance. You have to have that attitude, and that is Absolutely. An attitude that Cignetti has, and that's going to be a little bit different. And I'm not saying that Indiana didn't say, "Hey, we're going to win this game" when they go out to play, but there's a difference between saying it and actually thinking it, believing it, and living it. Yep. And I'm not sure that they've been in all of that situation. You've been a coach, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to actually believe. If you're in the fourth quarter and you're down by 10, you have to actually believe that you're going to come back and win, that this is not out of your control. And that is something that is very, very difficult to get across to guys that are on teams that have not had the greatest of success.
Yeah. And, the big thing is coaches can, you can give great lip service to that theory that you just talked about. The question of it is can you have that belief and then project that belief in a contagious way to not only your staff and coaches and everybody in the building, but the players, because they're the ones that'll sniff out, the BS from the true belief. And I think that's what separates him in a lot of ways, is that his belief in not only in preparation of his teams, but making that belief felt and heard throughout the corridors of the football stadium and that with the kids, and then it permeates out to the fans, is something that he does quite well. And I believe that's where the genuine aspect of his personality comes through when he talks about winning and what it takes to win and how you win one score games, like he emphasized in his press conference. So those are the things that he's done at all the places that I think may separate him in a lot of ways from those that have been in that same chair before at Indiana. And I think it's a contagious, contagious characteristic. And when you can feel that way and you can believe that way, it's a big plus in your favor being a coach.